Good evening and welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex. Lord, I hope everyone had a good 4th of July weekend. And with the 4th of July, we can also call it the burial of the Atlanta Braves because the Spencer Schwellenbach news drops late last week. Then you go out and cap off a 3-game sweep, getting swept by the Orioles 2-7 over the homestand, nearly 10 games out of the wild card race. You don't have a rotation that features more than 2 major leaguers. Your lineup is unbelievably, unspeakably anemic. It's just insane to me how they are just so absolutely I mean, this is the worst offense in baseball right now and has been for quite some time. They rank 24th in run scores, which is the only stat that matters. I don't care about expected stats. They, at scoring runs, they are 24th in the league. And you look at the teams behind them, and you're like, wow, those teams really. That's who the Atlanta Braves are. They are behind the Miami Marlins. So they are a selling baseball
what
team.
your parents always say, you are who you keep your company with, or whatever that saying is. Like, look around the Atlanta Braves and whatever stat you want to look at, and that's the company. That's the company you keep, and that's who you are. Like, we can keep talking about, well, we have a positive run differential and this and that, and the expected stats argument. It's like, no. The company we keep is the bottom of the league right now, and that's what we are.
I mean, they're very, very close in the way that they continue to go on these little runs where they go 2-7 or 0-7 or 0-8. Like, we've seen several of these now. They're very, very close from continuing one of these runs, which they're in one of those ruts right now, and they play the Athletics, which you think, oh, you got to win those. They might not. Like, they are the Athletics. Like, they are the Athletics of the Braves. They are bad. They're very, very close to being the second worst team in the National League, and the only team ahead of behind them is the Colorado Rockies, the worst team probably ever. Literally the worst team ever. That is the only team in the National League. They are close. They're only like a 2 games ahead of the Pirates and like a game and a half, maybe even a game ahead of the National. I mean, they are downright dreadful. And then you throw in the injuries into the mix, which haven't been the reason why they've been dreadful. I don't want people making excuses for this team, but it just makes it that much harder to even win 70 games. Like, not screw the playoffs. This team could be a 60-win baseball team. Like, that is very, very possible. And the buying question to me is dead. I mean, there's a case you could make where they could buy to help future teams, but that's hard. It's easier to buy in the offseason than the trade deadline. It's better for sellers because everyone is trying to buy stuff. So It's hard to buy to improve your team unless you're trying to go for it this year. It's just a matter of what they're willing to sell. And I think that's the big question right now.
Yeah, it's hard to watch this team. It's hard to watch this team.
I had to take a day off. I had to take a day off Sunday. I was like, I'm going on the boat. I am not. Of course, I checked the score, and I was like, oh, wow, we have 1 run, 0 runs until the 9th inning. And did you see the Braves tweet, which is like, read the room? Sean Murphy hits a home run, 2-0 in the 9th inning. It's a solo shot to cut the lead to 1. And they tweet out, on the board.
It's kind of funny. That's kind of funny.
It's kind of funny. It's funny if the guy wasn't just complete, like the guy there wasn't trying to just like not be funny. Like, it's ironically funny that they're tweeting that out. Like, if he was trying to be ironically funny, it's hilarious.
Right.
But given the situation where he's not,
this isn't the Stripers social media. I mean, this is the Atlanta Braves social media. This guy's definitely just trying to get it. Yeah, it's funny. It's hard. It's hard to we were talking about it. The people I was around and I have a buddy who was just like, he's pretty pessimistic, but he's like, dude, how are you still not giving up on the Braves? And I think this weekend really did it for me. I think I am done. I'm not done, with the Atlanta Braves, but the likelihood, I mean, I think I saw something today. We have a 5% chance of making the playoffs.
Which is BS. They don't have a chance.
I have not seen a figure that low since I started like really covering the Atlanta Braves ever. I mean, it's always been even when we were 10 games back, like it's always been like, well, they'll make the wild card. They might not win the division last year, 23, yada, yada, yada. But it was still like, they're going to make 5%. That is so mind-bogglingly bad. Like, I don't even think we have to start talking about the trade deadline should be the overarching theme. And I do think there's a case to make, a move or two in terms of additions. Like you said, it might be harder than it is in the offseason. But if a deal comes across Anthopoulos' plate where it improves the team in 2026, it's a no-brainer. But I think that's the overarching theme of the trade deadline. Whether it's buying or selling, it's just making the 2026 team better. That might be selling, in terms of prospects that could, improve the team in 2020. All right, I won't even say 2026, but the goal of this year's trade deadline should be to improve the team beyond 2025. It is no longer about improving the team in 2025. Now, it could be a two birds, one stone. That deal exists out there. It might be few and far between, but the overarching theme of this trade deadline has to be improving future years. You cannot sacrifice anything beyond 2025 to improve this team for just 2025. That would be malpractice at its worst. To sacrifice something. I don't even care if it's a 1 iota of an asset to try and improve 2025. This season is lost. It is lost. Every single ounce of energy should be used on improving the teams of the future. It's that simple. It sucks to say. It's hard to swallow, especially with where we were second best odds to win the World Series in the entire league. It's just the reality. We have to swallow this pill. I hope Alex Anthopoulos is, maybe aware enough, or at least doesn't have as big of an ego to know that. That's the question.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, I think once Schwellenbach and Sale went down, I think everyone kind of recognized that the writing is on the wall. And the question is, and I think we'll get into it next segment, so stick with us, just about the kind of directions that they can take. And those words that Alex Anthopoulos said, where he was so emphatically saying there's no way that they trade players past this season. Well, if that's the case, you're
under
screwed.
Team control.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If that's the case, you're screwed. Like you have got to start thinking creatively, because the idea that positive regression is going to save this team in the future by itself is just not going to happen. Like, you have to start being more willing to make a big swing. And I'm not talking about trading Ronald Acuna. I don't think that'll ever be on the table, but everybody else, except for maybe him, Baldwin, and Olsen, has to be somewhat on the table if teams are coming to calling. You better at least be listening, because nobody has earned the right to just be completely ignored and have their position locked up for the foreseeable future. But I think the bigger issue at play here is the future of the Atlanta Braves. And it's funny how, we ridiculed people on this show. I was there. Everyone else was doing it as well. So I'm not going to sit here. We were all in the same group. We were laughing at anybody that even mentioned the notion that these long-term contracts could potentially come back and bite the Braves. It was what other fan bases were calling us cheaters. They were like, what do you have on these guys? A highway robbery. Everyone, we were all talking about it. We all thought it. And then there were a few brave souls. There was a Jeff Schultz. There was Kylie McDaniel of ESPN, who, after the 2023 season, when this team set all those records, were willing to come out during the offseason and be like, hey, there is a world where this all doesn't work out. And we laughed at them. Well, those guys, those brave souls, turned out to be more right than we ever could have imagined.
I kind of forgot about, I'm going to do something on that, just to shout out Jeff Schultz, man. That guy
that was like
bravely said 2023, and it was, I think, his last year with the Athletic, maybe second to last year. And he specifically Mike Harris and Ozzie Albies. And in hindsight's 2020, you pull the trigger on those two guys when their value was at its absolute highest compared to it is right now. It's absolute highest. We're talking about a much different looking baseball team.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think those brave souls, I mean, they deserve to.
They deserve a victory lap. And I know Schultz isn't on Twitter anymore. He's probably enjoying retirement, and he'll probably never come back. But I think that we should try and reach out to him and be like, he was right.
They deserve to be committed. And it's grim. Like, it's not unsalvageable, but it's grim. It is very grim, though. The future, when you talk about these guys that we have under contract, the holes and where they're at in the farm system, it's going to be a tough hole, a very, very difficult hole to climb out of. And it's going to take making significant adjustments. And I wonder if we hear from Alex Anthopoulos. I don't know if it'll happen at the trade deadline. It might be off-season work or whatever. But if he's unwilling to move off some of these guys, which he maybe should have done sooner if we look at it in hindsight, I don't know what the Atlanta Braves are going to do, because positive regression alone isn't going to save this team.
I don't know what you do. I am still not there. I still think, I think Mike Harris is one of those. You can't move Mike Harris now. I mean, his value's never been lower.
Well, let's talk about that. I did want to get into the specifics. Let's talk about the actual names of guys that they could potentially float at this year's trade deadline, and then maybe in the future as well. 3 weeks ago, Alex Anthopoulos said emphatically that he would not trade any players with multiple years of control. But with the way that things have happened, this is why you never make promises, right? This is why you never make promises. You just never know.
He's on a bad roll of doing this.
Yeah, you just never. And yeah, I mean, and listen,
coaching staff,
there is precedent, right?
Payroll.
That he has gone back on some of these comments that were like, oh, well, then when Alex Anthopoulos says it, he genuinely means it. And over the last year, we've seen the coaching staff. He said, hey, we're not going to fire anyone on the coaching staff. They made sweeping changes to the coaching staff. Hey, payroll is going to go up. Payroll fell by $30 million. And then, 3 weeks ago, he says, we're not going to trade anyone with multiple years of control. And it almost feels like, in a way, if they don't have to, but they have to consider it. Like, they have to undoubtedly keep their options open. And trading at the trade deadline in this era's of baseball, where you have 6 wildcard teams, which means 20 teams right now are not ready to wave the white flag, and 20 teams could be buying, which means this is a seller's paradise. This is where you can really make a team eat it in the future because they're so desperate to compete for now. Maybe they haven't been in the playoffs in 6 years, and they're willing to give up 3 of their top prospects for Sean Murphy. And if you're not willing to at least consider that, what are we doing here? Like, there's no way you can convince me that Alex Anthopoulos, specifically when it comes to the Sean Murphy thing, who's been playing better and could garner a ton of interest across the league, can at least consider, when you have Drake Baldwin and all these future holes, trying to fill some of those holes with younger players that are on cheap contracts at the trade deadline. There's no way you can tell me he's not considering that. Now, 3 weeks ago, I understand why he wasn't, but now, come on.
Yeah, I mean, Sean Murphy, maybe outside of Chris Sale, I would still probably put Sean Murphy right there because of the injury to Chris Sale, but he will be back. So Chris Sale is still an asset at this point that can be moved. But right now, as currently, Sean Murphy is the most attractive trade chip the Braves have. Now, obviously, that doesn't include Acuna. You'll have some butthead going, well, what about Acuna? Yes, obviously, if we're including everyone, Acuna. But guess what? We live on Earth. We live in reality. We're not trading Ronald Acuna Jr. The trade chips that we would actually think to move. Sean Murphy is by far and away the most valuable, in my opinion. He's a top 10 catcher in baseball easily. He's a kind of guy who could go and even without experience in a pitching staff, still call a pretty damn good game. And oh yeah, he reminded everybody over the last 3 weeks that he's pretty damn good with the stick as well. I think that, my biggest thing with the whole defending Sean Murphy and they're not going to trade him was more so on the fact that, we were going to be competing. And we're competing, and I'd rather have 2 good catchers than a potential, midseason trade where you might not get the best value because you don't have the full landscape. It's almost like doing a quick deal to get a quick deal done more so than surveying all of your options. But this is a completely different situation. This situation is completely different in the way that the Braves have no chance of making the playoffs. This move will not probably net somebody who can help in 2025 rather than probably 3 or 4 guys that'll probably help 2026, 27, 8, and 9, whatever it might be. So I think you do have to weigh. You do have to weigh all the possibilities because this is no longer one of those luxuries that you can afford. Is what my past point was, that this is a luxury, having 2 top 10 catchers. And now I would still argue in that same breath that half a season of Drake Baldwin, we just saw what Mike Harris can be. Sean Murphy's track record is much more extensive than Drake Baldwin's. I'm not saying Drake Baldwin's going to be Michael Harris by any means, but I'm just saying that has to be in the back of some people's minds that we have half a season worth of proof that Drake Baldwin is a top 10 catcher. Sean Murphy has multiple seasons of proof that he is a top 10 catcher. So the haul in that same breath would be astronomical.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I mean, it's a good point when Drake Baldwin, I think when you look at the approaches of Drake Baldwin compared to Michael Harris, even when Michael Harris was having success, they're night and day difference. You're a little more confident, but at the end of the day, as I mentioned, you're kind of in a bad spot where you have to be a little bit more aggressive. You have to be a little bit more willing to do these. You have to be, hey, bet on Drake Baldwin and bet on him. And hopefully you bet correctly, unlike what you did with Michael Harris. I'm with you with what you said on the last thing. Michael Harris, a contract that is as close to any contract that's underwater on the team right now. Yeah. I do think teams would call, but it would be nothing more than just getting rid of the contract. And I think he's making $8 million really for the next several years. Like, it's like, dude, if he can just be worth one WAR, like I'm willing to roll the dice there. In terms of Ozzy Albies, if anybody wanted to take that, I know it would just be a salary dump, but get rid of that $4 million. You're going to have to owe him in an option. Bring up Nacho Alvarez, not against anything like that. You obviously have the expiring deal of Marcell Ozuna. If anybody wants that, take the rest of that money. We're not going to get any prospects for him. Pierce Johnson, Rafael Iglesias will probably garner some interest. Iglesias has been a lot better over the last month, which could help the Braves out in the long end. Aaron Bummer is a really interesting name because, one, he'll be one of the better lefties, even though I don't know why Braves fans hate him so much, but he'll be one of the better lefties on the market, in a market there where all 20 teams that are buying will want relievers. So he'll have a very good market, and his salary gets bumped up $6 million next year. I don't think you want to pay a middle reliever $9.5 million when you have all those other holes. So definitely a name to watch out for. But yeah, I think that's kind of where it ends. Like, is there any other name that you could think of?
I mean, people will bring up there's a couple, and these are much different. I think, Pierce Johnson, you still got him next year under contract, and it's a really nice number for the Atlanta Braves. And as we just saw, the bullpen can be real hit or miss. I know it's been overall good, but it's still been hit or miss. I think you keep him. But a guy like Grant Holmes, his value may never be higher. We all love what he's doing. You called that this was going to happen. A lot of people are excited about Grant Holmes, but let's also not, ignore the possibility of something else happening in the future, whether it's an injury. This guy has never pitched this much in the major leagues. Like, he just made it back to the majors this past season. A similar, Ronaldo Lopez, full season. So it's I'm just saying, his value may never be higher than it is right now. Obviously, Chris Sale is a little bit different because of the injury, but he's going to be back this year. So, I mean, a team would certainly still trade for Chris Sale, but his value definitely dipped a little bit with the injury.
I don't think there's any. I like the Grant Holmes bring up because I think that's a very good point. I mean, I like what he's been able to do, but I still think he's probably best utilized as a reliever when you look at his numbers going 100%. Throughout. And maybe he gets better throughout his career and he keeps improving his stuff. And listen, cheap, controllable starting pitching is going to get you a lot. And if someone's going to give you some good prospects, some good something that could really help us in the future, I'd definitely be open to those conversations. Chris Sale to me is still off limits, simply because I don't think you're going to get the kind of value you would have because of the fractured ribcage. Yeah. Now, maybe we'd have a different conversation if someone was like, I'm going to offer you 3 of our best prospects and guys that are going to be in the majors next year, and you're going to completely replenish the top of the Braves farm system, which is probably what he would have required had he been healthy. But I think that deal's probably off the table. So I would go back to him. I would have had a tough time trading him anyways, but I just feel like the situation makes it even more difficult. But I definitely think in terms of guys under contract past this year, Sean Murphy and Grant Holmes are going to be getting a lot of calls, and obviously relievers. I don't really throw them in the same thing, but there's going to be several relievers. I would be very interested to see what the Braves could get for Sean Murphy or Grant Holmes.
Yeah, those two are the best. And people who are like just wanting Mike Harris out of Atlanta, I mean, that would be one of the dumbest things ever. Because you just
gotta hope and pray that
you just have to listen. Ozzy Albies and him are completely different. You want to talk about you can't rely on positive regression. I think that's an individual thing that, like, it might not be smart to invest, but like, it is smart to rely on a little bit of positive regression for Mike Harris because he's young, he's athletic. He's shown you it a few times before that he is capable. And it's not like he has to go and be that guy who's hitting 285 over his first 3 seasons. He just doesn't have to be the worst player in baseball. And then he is a positive asset, even at that $8 million price tag, because he is so valuable in the field. If he can just be a league average hitter, that contract is worth it.
Yeah, and I think next year a big focus for the Braves will be having depth to where they can replace guys and kind of play the matchups and stuff like that. Like you definitely have to have an option going into next year as a potential backup to Michael Harris.
A starting outfielder.
In case,
like a fourth
on the bench.
Right, on the bench.
Like because that can play all 3 positions. Right. Because you have injury histories out there.
Injury. I don't know. Profar might fall into a bowl of steroids again, and who knows what the hell Mike Harris is going to be.
Yeah, I agree. But I think this trade deadline, it has the potential to be very interesting because I think everything that Alex Anthopoulos said, given the situation, I just don't know. There's no way
unless
you can
we
tell
go
me.
On a 14-0 run before the All-star.
Stop. This team is not going to go 7-7 over the next 14. We could go 0-14 maybe. We got some more to talk about coming up after the break. Kirk Cousins, part-time quarterback, part-time backup quarterback, part-time reality TV star. He has now been in both seasons of Netflix's quarterback series, and he basically said some very honest things up front, and we'll cover it over the next 2 segments. For starters, he said he was perplexed, surprised, caught off guard by the Michael Penix drafting 8th overall, as were we all. I mean, we were sitting up here live, and I've never had the reaction quite like I had. Very few times have I been left speechless. The Atlanta Braves offense in 2025 every night is one of them, and Michael Penix getting drafted 8th overall. I mean, listen. It was shocking. It's literally never happened in the history of football. No one has ever gone out there, paid north of $100 million for a quarterback, and then 3 weeks later drafted one in the top 10. Literally never happened. It's unprecedented. So we were all shocked.
Always funny when the Falcons were like, well, the Packers have done this. Like, they did not do this. They did not do this. They had 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks at the tail end of their career that have been in their organization for over a decade, that were on the end of their deals, all of their contracts, except for Rodgers. Favre was at the end of his deal. Rodgers still signed his extension, like I think a year and a half before they drafted Jordan Love. And then they drafted the successor you didn't do it within, I think I looked it up initially. It was within a 6-week period of the Falcons signing Kirk Cousins to then drafting Michael Penix Jr. It has never been done, no matter what the Falcons want to act like has been done. It's never been done. Kirk Cousins' reaction, completely valid.
Yeah, and I don't understand. I thought the other interesting aspect, because this is going a little bit further, was that he said that he might not have signed with the Falcons. Obviously, the reason that he left Minnesota was because Kevin O'Connell and that coaching staff said, hey, we got the 12th overall pick. We like this QB class. We're going to draft the quarterback. The Falcons didn't present that. Now, understandably, Kirk Cousins was probably pissed off by that. That would piss off anyone that's lied to or led astray. You have a right to be pissed off, but the Falcons shouldn't ever be worried about Kirk Cousins and his feeling. This is a business. Now, you can make the argument, and we'll make the argument all day, that was a stupid business decision, that they had absolutely no business making both of those moves 6 weeks apart. But if that's how they felt, if they felt like that was the best course of action for their organization to win football games now and in the future, they don't have to reveal anything to Kirk Cousins. I mean, the best organizations usually don't.
Yeah, I think you have a very strong argument to say he would not have left Minnesota, because while he does follow the almighty dollar like we all do, I do think that uprooting his family from Minnesota to make a move as monumental as this, where he thought he was going to end his career in Atlanta, I mean, that might take, precedence over the money. Now, of course, we know Kirk, is going to follow the dollar pretty much no matter what. But if both situations were the same in terms of Falcons told him, we might draft a quarterback, Vikings said, we might draft a quarterback, I imagine he would probably still weigh, the possibility of what contract is the best. But I think that he would have taken a little bit less to stay in Minnesota. Now, the Falcons probably wouldn't have had to offer him all that money, honestly, I honestly think the Falcons were negotiating against themselves, because Kirk Cousins was never going to get anywhere close to that amount of money from the Vikings, because the Vikings knew how stupid it would be to give him $100 million guaranteed and then draft a quarterback 6 weeks later. They knew. They probably offered him somewhere around half of that. But in that same breath, the situations were completely different, where he'd been with the Vikings for what? That was 8 years or something like that, because he was in Washington for 3 or 4, and then he went to Minnesota for the next 8 or so. They almost owed it to him to be like, hey, I'm going to be upfront with you. We know your family. We're going to go and do this. The Falcons didn't owe him a damn thing. They gave him all that money, and then that is it. This was a business transaction at the end of the day, and it's going to lead us into the next segment, which makes the other end the exact same fair deal.
Yep, I agree, and that's what we'll get into after the break. Kirk Cousins had a lot to say on Netflix's season 2 of Quarterback. most fan bases aren't the most logical bunch, and this is the case with the Falcons reacting to Kirk Cousins' comments where he talked about that injury he suffered in Week 10 against the Saints, which we all know what happened. He ends up playing like crap. He wasn't on the injury report. He said he was fine, yada, yada, yada. People are making it out like Kirk Cousins isn't a team player. Why wouldn't he be honest? And Kirk Cousins was honest in this thing. He mentioned the fact that, guess what? Michael Penix Jr. is the future of this organization. He saw that guy in practice, and he was pretty damn good, just like we saw when he came out on the field. He knew damn good and well that if he said, hey, I'm injured, bring in Penix, and Penix had any sort of success, if he didn't just look like an absolute tomato can out there, he probably wasn't getting his job back, not just this year, but next year as well. And that's exactly what's happened when he eventually was benched. So he was absolutely correct. And Falcons fans are upset with him. I don't understand, because as we just talked in the last segment, the Falcons didn't do right by him when they drafted Michael Penix Jr. Why the hell would Kirk Cousins do right by him and end his career as a backup quarterback willingly?
Both sides are in the right. And I get it. Fans are going to fan. Fans are emotional. Fans are obviously going to side with the team most of the time. Fans want what's best for themselves, their own interests, which is generally their team winning. But if we just look at this objectively, this is just business. At the end of the day, nothing is personal. The Falcons weren't trying to be personal with Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins wasn't trying to be personal with the Falcons and Falcons fans. That's just how you're taking it. This was business at the end of the day. The Falcons were in their own right to not tell Kirk Cousins about drafting Michael Penix. Right or wrong, I believe that they had every right to do that because they wanted to, they weren't going to, immediately give up some leverage at the negotiating table. You'd be a moron to do that. $100 million companies don't just come out outright and show all their cards. That's just not how the real world works. And in that same breath, how are you going to do that if you're a Falcons fan and go, yeah, we don't owe Kirk anything, and then be upset that he wasn't a team player? This isn't Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan owes everything to the Falcons. The Falcons owe everything to Matt Ryan. It's not a mutually exclusive situation where, like, Kirk Cousins doesn't owe us anything. It doesn't matter what you think happened or he's a scumbag or this or that. You put yourself in that situation and just try to be objective with yourself for 1 second. And it's the end of your career. You've done this your entire life. You're just going to give it up. No, you're not. And if you say yes, you're a liar or you're a loser who isn't an ultra competitor, which this guy is. I don't understand how Falcons fans are still trying to paint this guy as a villain. You know who you should be mad at? You should be mad at the Falcons. You should be mad at Raheem Morris. You should be mad at the medical staff. Even dating back to when they signed him, he came out earlier this offseason and said, yeah, the Achilles just wasn't where it needed to be, talking about his ankle mobility. Guess who that is on? Falcons medical staff for checking it off. And then week 10, the shoulder injury. How could me and Chase and our fat butts on a couch drinking beer tell you that he didn't have the zip on the ball that he had through the first 9 games, and the coaching staff did? The fact is, they probably did, but knew all that money was tied up. If they made the change, there's no going back. Pandora's box is open and yada, yada, yada. If you want to be mad at somebody, be mad at Raheem Morris and this coaching staff, the medical staff, and the front office personnel for not having the guts or hopefully the wherewithal to make the decision.
Yeah, that was my biggest takeaway from both of these situations, was that the Falcons are idiots.
Yeah.
Like, the Falcons were stupid for doing the whole Kirk Cousins fiasco in the first place if they were going to draft Michael Penix. There was absolutely no reason, and it's screwing them right now. And it was always going to happen one way or the other, where Michael Penix either sucked. There was never going to be a perfect marriage with this going on. It was never going to happen. We talked about it being a really tight window. It was stupid. There's a reason it's never been done before. It was ridiculed by everyone. There's very few times where everyone in the media is ridiculing, like, in unison. Like, even the sports shows like First Take couldn't even argue about it because it was so stupid. Like, it was a dumb decision, and in hindsight, it looks even stupider. Like, there was nothing.
And even when Falcons fans say, well, if we didn't draft Michael Penix, look at where we. Well, Kirk Cousins is healthier now than he probably was last season. He's probably going to be better this season than he was last season because he's got another year in the system. He's a year removed from that Achilles, and he's healthier. Like, the argument that you say, well, we would be lost without Michael Penix Jr., not really. The fact is we would be in a much better position either way with only one of them.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument you could even make that the worst quarterback in both seasons was starting. Like, Kirk Cousins could actually be better than Michael Penix this year, and last year Penix probably was going to be better just because he was healthier.
Yes.
Like, that's a real scenario. And then the other part is like, yeah, the Falcons are idiots. How the hell do they not? And why do people want to blame Kirk Cousins and not just blame the Falcons? Like, what have the Falcons done to you?
And deserve the benefit of the doubt.
Not even the benefit of the doubt. Like, what, to make you want to defend them?
Yeah.
Like, it's so much more fun to just crap on them doing stupid things over and over.
And the precedent is already there that we already know Raheem Morris has terrible decision making, whether it's in-game decision making or week-to-week decision making. We know about the Washington timeout fiasco. How about the Younghoe Koo injury fiasco that honestly cost, you could argue that almost cost a playoff spot as much as the timeouts and not going to Penix earlier. Both of those are squarely on the head coach.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It doesn't make sense why you want to paint Kirk Cousins and the villains when the villains of this story for the last 7 years have been the Atlanta Falcons. Yeah. They are the villains. We got more to talk about coming up after the break. John Hollinger over at The Athletic recently talked about a couple of an extension candidates. Now, everyone talks about Trae Young and Dyson Daniels, and both of them could be extended this offseason. But another one that people haven't really discussed because they've just assumed that Kristaps Porzingis would play a year in the system before receiving any type of extension or the Hawks making a decision is Porzingis. I just mentioned his name. But I think the interesting aspect that Hollinger brought up in this is it doesn't have to be an off-season extension. It can be an in-season extension, so they can actually make a deal during the season. So they can go and see, I don't know when the deadline is exactly, but they could go see a good amount of games, make sure he stays healthy, and then do this extension in the middle of the season, which I thought was very intriguing because that's not usually how NBA contracts are work.
Yeah, and I didn't know that, obviously, and John Hollinger brought it up. And I think more notable is the fact that I don't think somebody as respected as John Hollinger would really be bringing up all this stuff. We're going to get to Trae Young in a second. That without having some basis of knowledge of the information, like he wouldn't just be pulling it out of thin air. I really don't believe that. So, him bringing it up, getting Kristaps Porzingis on a 2-year extension for around $67 million. Let's just call it 70 for square numbers. $70 million, $35 million per season for a guy who's an all-star. If he plays enough games, it is a sweet deal for the Atlanta Hawks because we always talk about, trying to maximize the present without sacrificing too much of the future. And that is a deal that, gets even sweeter from what you already gave up, where you get out from under a bad contract and then you only have to give up the 22nd overall pick to immediately improve your team now without giving up too much in the future.
Yeah, and I thought the entire basis of this was interesting as we get into the Trae Young conversation because most expect, hey, we're going to sign this $230 million contract, which I'm not great at math, but it's less than 60. It's somewhere between $55 and $60 million a season. And he said, hey, not so fast, my friends. And this is something that I brought up because Zach Lowe also brought it up. And we've seen Trae Young kind of take this leadership role. And I don't know if the max contract's necessarily going to be there at the end of the season. There's a lot of team with really good point guards and stuff like that. And there's also a scenario where it works out with both sides because these contracts just keep escalating. And you're seeing a lot of guys take 2-year deals and then just like, re-upping for $20 extra million. And this is basically the picture that he painted. You sign that 2-year extension with Kristaps Porzingis, and then you go to Trae Young and say, hey, let's tack on another 2 years at around $50 million. Pretty damn good money, and keep everything on the same trajectory because then Zachary Rezeshay at the end of the line is up for a contract extension and other guys are up that need to get paid, and you can make decisions based on how you see fit. So you kind of have this runway. You have a lot of good contracts that are all movable, but you also have this runway with the current group to go out there and compete. And as we've mentioned, a wide open Eastern Conference for the next 3 seasons.
Yeah, because Kristaps Porzingis' number could go up. And if those two are a good duo, then Trae's number is going to only go up in terms of, hey, I'm not taking less than the max. And I'm still going to contend that it's the largest percentage of this outcome is going to be Trae Young taking another max contract extension. But Hollinger did point out for even Trae that this could be valuable. Maybe you do go a little bit higher on the AAV, but less on the years to give your own self some flexibility at the end of this deal where, it isn't quite working out in Atlanta. So you don't have to be tied in to this organization, which really hasn't done right by you for the majority, all of your time here. So I think it is an interesting proposition where, again, I don't think Hollinger is just talking out of his butt. Like, I think if he says this kind of stuff, well, then it's worth at least listening and discussing.
More than anything, it makes sense.
It does make sense from both sides.
It makes sense
even
for
with
all parties.
Kristaps' injury history and $35 million. If he's fully healthy and playing at his best, $35 million is way too cheap for him. But he knows 7'2" guys who are constantly injured don't suddenly get healthy at 30 years old.
I mean, he hasn't played more than 65 games since his rookie season.
So it makes sense for him.
He's been in the league for a decade, and $35 million, nothing to snuff at. I know guys are making like 75 these days, but $35 million.
Those guys are playing 75 games.
Yeah, is a pretty damn good deal. I thought it was interesting. I'm very interested to see how they handle all these extensions because Dyson Daniels is another guy that you want to get locked in very, very soon. You want that to happen this summer with everything that's taking place. So there's still a lot of work to be done, even if they aren't external candidates for the Atlanta Hawks. Wrapping up here on Sports Talk ATL with a prediction. Alex, the Braves likely going to sell. It just depends how big they're going to sell. What is your prediction for the biggest name that gets moved by the Braves at this year's trade deadline?
I guess it depends on your perspective of big name. Big Bear's probably a bigger name than Raisel Iglesias. He definitely is. But I think those two guys are probably going to get moved because you've got guys who can fill their roles. But I think, honestly, it might not be as easy as some Braves fans and national pundits think it is to move Ozuna. Whereas Raisel Iglesias has actually been an ascending player for the past 2 weeks or so. So playing better ball at the trade deadline is obviously going to make you more attractive, whereas Ozuna has been declining and rapidly for, going on 2.5 months now. So, I don't even know if there's a market for Ozuna to begin with. He was that DH who could give you, some pop in that. But he's hit 1 home run in 6 weeks. That's not a kind of guy you want on a DH. And he's not exactly a speedster, So I don't know. I mean, I don't even know if Ozuna gets moved. Is somebody going to want him?
I think you'd make a better case for anybody wanting him than getting anything of note for him because
Iglesias
has been the worst baseball player. That's not a joke. He's been the worst baseball player since the beginning of June. So he has been abysmal. I mean, I think his WRC plus is below 40. And if that's your designated hitter, your only job is to hit. You don't bring any speed. You don't bring any defense. Your only job is to sit there and hit. And he's done a damn good job of it in Atlanta for most of his career.
It's just the injury, and that's all it is. And
and that's the other thing. When you just tie in the fact that it's not just he's slumping. It's no, the guy literally has a tear in his hip.
Yeah.
It's hard. I do think someone bigger gets moved. It's just a matter of who. I think, there'll be conversations about Ozzie Albies. I think some team could take a swing on him and just be like, hey, you want to salary dump him? Yeah, we wipe our hands clean.
The upside is there because if you find something, you got him under 2 years, $7 million.
Yeah, and I think you could get a small prospect without maybe a mid-tier prospect and just let Nacho Alvarez see if he can play second base and then address the situation in the offseason because I just think it just feels like a situation that isn't going to get better, at least in my opinion. At least in my opinion. And I think if you can wipe clean of the $4 million you have next year, get some sort of prospect in return, and then also play Nacho Alvarez, who I think should be playing regardless in the second half of the season, it makes some sense. I do think they're going to get a ton of calls on Sean Murphy. And if someone gives them the proper offer, and he's been playing really good ball. And if they can convince someone that, hey, this is Sean Murphy, and someone falls in love because he's under team control, very team friendly deal. It's a great deal. He's going to get a ton of calls, and he could get a big haul. And I think if the proper haul is there, I don't know how you don't at least consider it if you don't think you can get something better in the offseason. Now, it's going to have to be a big deal because they have no reason to trade him. They literally have him under team control forever. They can wait till he's hot as Hades some other time, or Drake Baldwin completely takes the job and then move him. But I do think there could be some big offers for Sean Murphy that they might have to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I would not like it, but it just depends on the right deal. I do think that, you make a good point in terms of there's going to be more buyers, so the demand will be higher, but I still think that's an off-season decision where you've got all your cards laid out in front of you before making something hastily like that. Because that is even more than that. Then you've got a whole nother half of a season of data on Drake Baldwin. you feel more confident about him. Maybe that's a franchise altering move right there. It really is.
Well, they should have made it. They should have made it a couple of those a while ago. Maybe we're not in that spot. But that wraps up our show. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll be back with you tomorrow.